Hi there, welcome to the Healing Migraines Naturally podcast. I am your host, Dr. Leslie Caesar, and I am a former chronic migraine sufferer who has devoted her life to helping other women with chronic migraines recover their health so that their body stops getting migraines without adding new medication or taking a fistful of supplements. Today, I'm recording the first weekend in December 2025, so we're getting into the Christmas season, the holiday season, and we had a great question from my Facebook group, Healing Migraines Naturally with Leslie Caesar ND. Help, this time of year with all of the holiday scents, I am getting more migraines. So what do I do about this? So I thought this would be a great thing to discuss this week on the podcast because yes, right, this time of year you've got all of the scents. People like to kind of bring out the holiday spirit with all of the scented candles in their home. I used to work in an office. I used to work in corporate America, and so a lot of people, I remember, like a lot of coworkers this time of year, they even want to bring the holiday scent to the office, right? So they might have like a little essential oil diffuser on their desk with like the pumpkin spice latte scent or something like that. You go into like Home Goods this time of year, like you're going to be knocked out, right, by all of the candle scents and the holiday scents and all that kind of stuff, right? So it's a real gauntlet that migraine sufferers can run this type of year just going into a store or something like that. Not everyone who's prone to migraines is very sensitive to odors, but it's a pretty common phenomenon, right? So a lot of migraine sufferers, they will say that they have like a bloodhound nose, right? Like they're the one in their family that's constantly like smelling stuff. Even when they're not in a full-blown migraine, they're like maybe smelling something in their house and like saying to their husband or saying to their kids, hey, do you smell that? And everybody's like, no, I don't smell anything. And they're like, where is it coming from? Where is it coming from, right? Or they are very sensitive to people's perfume, right? So again, back at the office, right? Even if they're not in a full-blown migraine, but they're sitting in that, conference room meeting with, that one coworker that's always drenched perfume and so on. Like they're like feeling like the walls are closing in, right? Where everybody else hardly notices it, right? To a store or something like that. So not everyone who's prone to migraines is very sensitive to odors, but it's a pretty common phenomenon, right? So a lot of migraine sufferers, they will say that they have like a bloodhound nose, right? Like they're the one in their family that's constantly like smelling stuff. Even when they're not in a full-blown migraine, they're like maybe smelling something in their house and like saying to their husband or saying to their kids, hey, do you smell that? And everybody's like, no, I don't smell anything. And they're like, where is it coming from? Where is it coming from, right? Or they are very sensitive to people's perfume, right? So again, back at the office, right? Even if they're not in a full-blown migraine, but they're sitting in that, conference room meeting with, that one coworker that's always drenched perfume and so on. Like they're like feeling like the walls are closing in, right? Where everybody else hardly notices it, right? So even when people aren't in a full-blown migraine, a lot of times they're much more sensitive to odors. And then, right, full-blown migraine, forget about it, right? So this is even more common. Someone may not be that sensitive to smells in their sort of everyday environment if they're not in a migraine, but once they go into a migraine, right, forget about it. Like can smell the trash or that food odor, right? Who's making ground beef, right? It's like, I don't want to smell any of that. That smells terrible. They become even more sensitive to odors once they go into a full-blown migraine. And then probably like the most troubling are people that are so sensitive to odors that being exposed to the odor will tip them into a full-blown migraine, right? And so this is, I would say, the most disruptive to people's lives because We are inundated with all of these like scents, from the candles, or people like essential oil diffusers. But then you even have detergents. I have clients where, they can't walk down the laundry detergent aisle in the grocery store without getting a migraine, or they can't walk down the coffee aisle in the grocery store without getting a migraine, because those products, right, are just off-gassing odor into the store aisle, and they can't tolerate it without getting a migraine. Those are probably like the three main levels of odor sensitivity that migraine sufferers are prone to. Another interesting phenomenon too with migraines that is not very common, this is a rarer symptom, but there are people who, when they get a migraine, they experience an olfactory hallucination, right? So this is where they smell like a phantom smell. They smell something, or they perceive that they're smelling something that actually isn't in the environment. So typically, it's a smoke type smell that they will perceive. So they will perceive like a burning wood smell, or like a tobacco, like a burning tobacco, cigarette, or cigar type burning tobacco type smell that is not actually existing in the environment. There's like no wood being burned, or nobody smoking a cigarette, but they perceive that type of an odor, and it's actually what is called an olfactory hallucination. That is different than an odor sensitivity, because the odor molecules are not actually present. What's happening is it's similar to a visual aura. A visual aura, you're perceiving a visual disturbance, but it's actually happening in the visual cortex of your brain. An olfactory hallucination is actually happening in your brain, in the area that processes the olfactory input from the nose. So it's similar. So you can kind of think of that more like a visual aura. It's just something that you're perceiving as a smell or as an odor that's not actually there. Just like with a visual aura, you're perceiving, right, that swirling kind of kaleidoscopy type thing, but that there's not actually like that's obviously not happening in the real world, right? And there's nothing happening in your eyeball. It's all happening in the visual cortex of your brain. So let's go back to the odor sensitivity piece of this, okay? So what's going on here? So odor sensitivity relates back to what I refer to as the second principle. So if you've been following the podcast, if you've taken any of my free trainings, I talk about what I call the three principles, or the three things that our body needs in order to restore itself back to a state of health and maintain its state of health. And so the first principle is we have to get the nutrients that our cells need to our cells. Our cells are not going to function properly if they don't have the nutrients that they need. The second principle is we have to clear metabolic waste material and other toxins from the cells and from our body. So when our cells get the nutrients that they need to do their work, in the process of doing their work, they're making waste material. That waste material has to be detoxified and removed from the body. So that's the second principle. The third principle is we have to restore our resiliency and vitality so that we can weather the stressors that are continuously bombarding us. A lot of times we call them migraine triggers. We have to have enough resiliency and vitality to weather those stressors so that we don't get tipped over into a migraine. Hi there, it's Dr. Leslie. If you're a woman having 8 or more migraine days a month, let's talk. I'll show you how to drop them to near zero in 90 days without adding more medication. In fact, you can even lower or maybe even completely wean off of your medication within 90 days and without agonizing cold turkey withdrawals. Let me tell you about my client Judy. She was on such strong medications for her migraines that she was nearly bedridden and could barely function. she had to close the doors of her small business and felt like a failure. She wondered every day, why am I doomed to suffer from these migraines? But just like you, she started listening to my Healing Migraines Naturally podcast, and a spark ignited. She knew that if she could just figure out why these migraines started in the first place, she could restore and recover her health again. So she booked her free consult call with me, and the rest is history. She now goes months between migraines and runs her small business full-time again because she's completely off of those preventative medications. She followed the 12-week plan and got incredible results. I've worked with women just like Judy from all over the United States overcome migraines naturally. So if you're serious about healing your migraines, then tap the link in the description and book a free consult call with me, just like Judy did. We do cap new clients monthly, so if the calendar's full, the doors are closed for now, so don't wait to reclaim the life you deserve to live. No matter how hopeless things seem now, with expert guidance, you can heal and recover from migraines. So I look forward to chatting with you. Click the link now to schedule your call. So odors actually tie into this second principle. So let me dig into this a little bit deeper. So in the air are little molecules, and when we inhale them, the little molecules stimulate the olfactory nerves in our nose. And so they stimulate the nerve, and the nerve sends a little signal to the brain. Those little molecules, what happens to them after they enter our nose? Okay, we have to get them out of our nose. If they get absorbed into our bloodstream, we've got to get them out of our body. So what we think of as like an odor molecule, right? Like, oh, I smell a candle. Well, what's actually happening? The candle is off-gassing little molecules, and those little molecules, when they stimulate the olfactory nerves in the nose, the brain processes that and perceives it as pumpkin spice, nutmeg, or whatever, right? It perceives it as an odor, a smell, right? Something hopefully pleasant, right? So, but there isn't, right? It's not like there's a little miniature pumpkin spice latte that went up our nose, right? It's little molecules that are floating around in the air, and they stimulate those nerves. Our brain processes that, and then we perceive that as a particular odor. But again, what happens to that molecule? So that little molecule, if it goes into the bloodstream, we got to detoxify it. Now it's an environmental toxin. Okay, now, when we hear the word environmental toxin, we think of man-made toxins, right? Modern toxins that are in the environment that we've made and we've put in the food supply and the air supply and the water supply. But the environment, even before humans had the ability to manipulate the environment in the way that we do and kind of create the chemicals that we make, the environment has always had environmental toxins in it. Okay, so even before we were making, pesticides, wood was being burnt. Things were being burned. So when things are being burned, molecules are being off-gassed into the air that we are going to breathe in and are going to have to get out of our body again. Okay, so I'm not downplaying the environmental toxins that are in our environment currently that are so-called man-made. But we have never been living in some sort of pristine, toxin-free environment, okay? We humans have always been living under a significant load of environmental toxins. Like, for example, mold, okay? Particularly the way that we live here in the United States, we are exposed to far less mold. I mean, unbelievably less mold than many humans still on Earth are exposed to typically. And if you just went back a couple hundred years, right, when we were living in dwellings that didn't have the ventilation and, weren't as dry as they are, right? The modern American dwelling is a very dry environment that has very little mold in it compared to if you went back 200 years, the types of dwellings that people were living in were a lot damper and there was a lot more mold growing. So I don't want to have, like I say, I'm not trying to downplay what's in our environment that we have caused, but we are kind of living in this sort of myth right now culturally that we used to live in a very pristine environment and now we don't. But in reality, from the body's perspective, we have always been living in an environment that was full of environmental toxins that our body had to detoxify and get out of our body, right? So, again, many people around the world, even today, let alone what would have been typical for everybody just a few hundred years ago, right, are living in a dwelling where they're burning combustible material for heat and for cooking right there within their dwelling. And they're just breathing all of that right as they're sitting next to the fire in their dwelling with not that good ventilation, right? So again, our modern American dwelling with, central air, central heating, windows, it's, if anything, we're using a humidifier. It's so dry, right? It's like our environment is a lot more pristine than it was just a few hundred years ago. So I say this, again, not to get people too paranoid, but I say this because our body has been designed to remove these environmental toxins from our body, right? Because we've always been in this type of an environment where we're exposed to environmental toxins that have to be removed from the body. So we have the ability to do this, okay? I don't want people to feel sort of this doom and gloom that, oh my goodness, everything is polluted and now we're stuck, right? Our body is designed to remove these toxin molecules from the environment. And so when we breathe in something that stimulates the olfactory nerves and we perceive that as an odor, we're actually breathing in an environmental toxin. So this could be, molecules from an essential oil diffuser, from a candle, from somebody cooking beef on the stove, right? From the trash can, from the vehicle in front of us on the highway, right? All of these things are coming into the body as we're inhaling, and our body has to detoxify them and eliminate them from the body. So what happens to people is their body becomes overloaded with metabolic waste material and toxins. Why would that happen? That happens because your organs of detoxification, you have 3 organs of detoxification. That's your liver, your kidneys, and your lungs. Interesting that your lungs are an organ of detoxification. So the liver is doing the bulk of the work, so I'm just going to refer to the liver for simplicity purposes. So we have our organs of detoxification that process these toxin molecules so that they can actually get out of the body. Until they're processed, they're sort of stuck in our body. So they have to be processed so that they can be eliminated. So what happens is that the liver gets overloaded. The liver has to run the detoxification pathways fast enough to keep up with the load. Now, what does the liver need to run those detoxification pathways? Your liver needs nutrients. So the first principle, okay? So if we start to develop a deficiency or a blocker within that first principle, and our liver doesn't have what it needs to run those detoxification pathways, it's going to slow down. Things are going to start to slow down. The other thing that the liver needs is cellular voltage or vitality. So this ties into the third principle. Part of the third principle is the literal cellular voltage that's required for the cell to run optimally, right? So if our liver is a little bit low voltage, it's not going to run as fast. So what happens to people is they start to develop a deficiency or a blocker within the first principle and the third principle, and then their liver starts to slow down, and then the waste material and the environmental toxins start to build up. Remember, it's not just about toxins from the environment. We're making waste material all the time. We're making toxin molecules all the time as part of our metabolism, right? So when the liver starts to slow down, that's when things start to back up. Okay, so when we breathe in an odor molecule, we're breathing in additional toxin molecules. If I'm already overloaded, right? If I've got like this little toxin bucket, this little trash can, and it's already loaded up to the brim, and then I breathe in a bunch of smoke molecules, boom, right? I'm going to have a problem. Okay, so we become more and more sensitive to things the fuller and fuller that toxin bucket becomes. Okay, so if my liver is working optimally because my first principle and my third principle are in a good shape, and then my liver can run optimally, as things are being added to this bucket, as little toxin molecules and waste materials are being added to this bucket, my liver is going to be able to keep that bucket drained. And then if I breathe in a bunch of perfume from somebody in an elevator, or somebody's candle at work because they want to get in the holiday spirit, so they're burning a little candle at work, I've got some room for that. I've got some room in my bucket to take in some additional toxin molecules. If I'm already overloaded, right? If I'm like barely hanging on, and then, right, it's like straw on the camel's back, right? One little molecule of a pumpkin spice candle, and now the whole bucket is overflowing, right? And so when that happens, I could get a migraine. If I've got room in my bucket and I breathe in that little pumpkin spice candle, it's pleasant, right? Okay, great. Now I'm more in the holiday mood. But if my bucket is all the way up to the top and I'm breathing in this pumpkin spice off-gas candle, I don't have any room for that. And I'm going to perceive that to be much stronger than it actually is. It's going to become unpleasant instead of pleasant. And when that happens and we go, oh my goodness, that candle, right? Oh, this is terrible. And everybody's looking at us like, I think it smells nice, right? That's because we get into this hypersensitive state the fuller and fuller that bucket is, and then we start to perceive things as being unpleasant or being stronger than everyone else perceives them. So this explains, right, why somebody whose bucket is right up to the top, they start to smell things that are in the environment. This is not an olfactory hallucination. These are actual odor molecules that are in the environment, but we start to become hypersensitive and we start perceiving them much more acutely, whereas other people are like, I don't really smell much, but we're smelling it like it's right there, right there in front of us, because we are more sensitive to it because that toxin bucket is up to the top. When we are in a full-blown migraine, any migraine or headache is an indication that that bucket is overflowing. And so if the bucket is already overflowing and we're in a migraine and then somebody starts cooking ground beef on the stove, we're already overloaded, we're going to find that very unpleasant, right? Versus if we're not in a migraine and somebody's making hamburger, it's like, oh, okay, great, when's dinner? But when we're in that migraine, oh, yuck, what are you cooking? That smells terrible, get that out. I'm smelling it in the kitchen hours later, right? Because we are already overloaded. That's obvious because we are already having the migraine. And then finally, for the people who will get tipped into a migraine when they smell something, right? That's because their bucket is right near the top. They're right on the verge of overflowing. And again, straw on the camel's back. Just one more little thing added to that bucket, and now their bucket is tipped over and they're in a full-blown migraine state. I have had so many clients over the years where they will get a migraine with any kind of odor. If their coworker uses fabric softener sheets on their laundry, they can't sit in the cube next to them, right? Because they can perceive the off-gassing of that fabric softener and no one else can perceive it. It's not a hallucination. Those odor molecules are actually there. It's just that they are so hypersensitive to perceiving those odors because their toxin bucket is all the way filled up to the brim. So what I see over and over and over again is as we get that bucket drained, as we address the blockers or deficiencies within the first principle and the third principle, the liver starts running faster because it has what it needs to do its job. And then we start draining that bucket. And then we start lowering the level. And what do you know? Suddenly people aren't so sensitive. I mean, I can think of example after example of clients over the years where, oh yeah, I could never, my husband, he would, cook his, venison steaks and I couldn't tolerate it. I just said, can you do that outside? I can't tolerate this. Like, get this out of my kitchen. Lo and behold, she comes home, her husband's cooking the venison steaks. Oh, that actually smells good. That smells kind of savory, right? What's going on here, right? This used to just, I would, want to vomit smelling this in the past. Or lo and behold, I was able to sit in the car with my friend. We were able to go out to lunch together in the same car because I could sit in her vehicle with her despite her laundry detergent, right? I have had clients that have not been able to ride in the car with a family member or a friend because they cannot tolerate the off-gassing of the laundry detergent that their friend uses. I mean, this can really impact people. But when we get that bucket drained, lo and behold, they can tolerate that and they can, go over to a family member's house and tolerate their candle usage, right? They can tolerate the fabric softener that they use on their clothing. Being able to go into your office environment and, know that if a coworker comes in with a little bit more perfume today, you're going to be fine, right? That absolutely can happen. This is not something that's hard-coded into you. This is not something that's genetic. This is a natural result of what happens when that toxin bucket, when that little trash can gets to overflowing state. And again, it gets that way because our liver starts to slow down because it doesn't have what it needs within the first and the third principle. So I will also say, when I talk about the second principle and I say, clearing metabolic waste material and other toxins from the body, a lot of people right away, they say, oh, you're talking about detox, right? Because detoxification within the natural medicine space that I am a part of is a big deal, right? Everybody talks about this. But what people are not understanding, unfortunately, a lot of natural practitioners don't understand this, and then definitely the general public, like how do we get in this position in the first place? I can say, definitely we do have man-made environmental toxins that are playing a role. But yes, we have these man-made toxins, but we have never been living in a pristine toxin-free environment. So it's much more complex than just, detox, toxin overload from the environment, let's just do a detox. What's really going on here is the subtle interplay between all three of these principles. I believe that we have gotten into the toxicity problem that people are talking about, rightly so. We haven't gotten there just because of man-made toxins. We've gotten there because we have an epidemic of Americans who are not able to get the nutrients that their cells need to their cells, and their vitality is low. Their vitality is diminished. And so those two things are playing a tremendous role in addition to things like man-made environmental toxins. So what a lot of natural practitioners don't understand, or what a lot of lay people, maybe you're listening to this and you've tried a cleanse, or you've done a 30-day quote-unquote detox or something like that. So if what those types of things consist of is sort of pushing your liver, sort of like whipping the horse of your liver, whipping a dead horse, and trying to make a dead horse run around the track faster, right? Because, like I say, if your liver doesn't have the nutrients that it needs to run those detoxification pathways, and you can read about these pathways in a biochemistry medical textbook. This isn't just like woo-woo naturopathic stuff I'm talking about. We know a lot about how this works. So if your liver doesn't have the nutrients that it needs to run those pathways, and you don't have cellular vitality or cellular energy, things are going to get backed up. And so if you're just going to whip the horse, but the horse hasn't had any hay in 5 days, right, you're not going to get around the racetrack. And unfortunately, a lot of natural practitioners don't understand this. A lot of lay people are doing these like kind of cleanse routines, and they don't understand that either. And I'm telling you, if you're prone to migraines, and you do this kind of thing, you do some of these detox schemes, these detox protocols, you're highly likely to get a migraine. Ask me how I know, okay? So this is because when we are prone to migraines, that's an indication that the toxin bucket is already up to the top. And then we get super sensitive to things, and you try to push the liver, you try to whip the horse, and the bucket just overspills, tips over, and everything spills out, and then we feel really sick. So you have to identify, okay, what are the blockers within the first principle, and how do we address that? How do we get more nutrients coming to your liver? And trust me, it's not just taking supplements like glutathione or things like that. And then how do we increase the vitality? Then, if we need to, we can gently push the liver to move a little bit faster, okay? You can't just beat the horse, but you can nudge the horse a little bit, and then we're going to get that bucket drained, okay? And then these symptoms like odor sensitivity are going to start to improve. And I love this phenomenon. I love it. It just tickles me every time it happens, because this is a symptom that when it starts to get better, you don't notice it, right? This is a symptom that when you walk in to a store and you're overwhelmed with that candle odor and you're like, oh my goodness, we got to get out of this home goods, right? That's when you notice it. But when the symptom starts to improve, when the toxin bucket starts to drain, and then you go into a home goods and then you're just enjoying browsing around and looking at all the little finds. And then after 30 minutes, you go, wait a minute, I don't smell anything, right? And it's like, well, maybe they don't have candles this time, right? Like maybe I missed the candle shipment or something. No, they still have the same obnoxious candles in there. I'm just not perceiving it like I used to. It's really, really fun when this symptom improves. And then again, for people that are really in the bad situation where they can't go over to somebody's house, can't, be in a car with somebody because of their laundry detergent, this is life-changing when this symptom starts to improve, right? So I hope this helps. I hope this gives you some insight into what's going on here. Let me know in the comments if this is something that you struggle with. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, like and subscribe to the channel. That'll help us grow, and it'll also make sure that you get notified when we have new podcasts coming out. And again, if you're struggling with odor sensitivity, this is something that can be turned around. We just need to determine what it is that your body needs within all three of these principles, and then put the right game plan together for you and get you feeling better so that you can, maybe you want to have a candle in your house, right? Maybe you want to be able to have a nice pumpkin spice candle next holiday season. It's totally possible for you. So very good. I'll talk to you soon.